Hey everybody, Pete A. Turner, executive producer and host of the Break It Down Show. As we get closer and closer to the release of the Prison Chronicles, we're starting to do the secondary things now. One of those is that we're getting background shows on all of the guests that we feature in the Prison Chronicles. One of the people in this series is a guy named Ron Self, who is a former Marine, Force Recon, tip of the spear, lots of deployment time kind of guy. And Ron ultimately went to jail for attempted murder, and we talk about his journey from being a kid all the way to his redemption point, and it gets intense. So you'll love this, and this will be a little bit of a teaser for the upcoming Prison Chronicles. I know that you guys will all want to hear. Episode 1 is done. Episode 2 basically is done. Episode 3 is almost there. We're getting really close to having everything set up and ready to go. So Ron is a big part of that story, and I can't wait for you guys to hear his story. The other thing, if you want to support the show, by the way, we're growing and growing like crazy on YouTube. So thank you so much for subscribing. I really appreciate all of you guys for doing that. But also in general, we appreciate all of your support. Please continue to share, tell friends about it, rate, review. If you've got ideas for guests, let me know. We're always looking and trying to figure out the next show. So definitely reach out and let me know what you think. Okay, one last thing. Save the Brave, savethebrave.org. If you can go there and contribute any small amount of money each month, that would be a huge help. Savethebrave.org. Do that. In addition, if you're not going to do the Save the Brave thing, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Think about charity as a gift. Go to CharityOnTop.org. You can give charitable amounts of money to anybody. And basically it comes in the form of a gift card or an e-card. And they can then take that money. Let's say you gave them $25. And they can say, well, I'm going to give this to the whatever charity it is. It can be anything they want, 1.8 million charities. So CharityOnTop.org. Think about charity as a gift, especially now when everybody's trying to figure things out. This might be a good time. All right, here comes Ron Self.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick
This
Morana.
is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hello, this is Ron Self, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show.
Yeah, I'm having Ron on because we're working on this Prison Chronicles project, and Ron holds down a big pillar of the story. At one point, he was convicted of attempted murder and did a number of years in jail, but he's also the veteran face of what we do. And I thought it would be important to tell his part of the story in more depth and slow down so that those folks that go through the Prison Chronicles can learn more specifically about Ron, because we don't spend a lot of time talking about your background. You allude to a couple of terrible incidents that you had to go through. But I just wanted to kind of get some background. You know, you start in the I'm doing Cody fingers, the military, early on as a little kid, and end up, for decades you're in this world. So let's talk a little bit about your path along the way to becoming a badass Marine recon warrior.
Yeah, well, I think my story, started like everybody's as a kid. And through doing this work is what I found out that I'm not that unique in my story, but my specific story is such that due to turbulence at home with the parents separating, so on and so forth, I went to live with my grandparents at the age of 6. Who doesn't want to live with their grandparents?
Right.
I mean, come on. But again, because of the turmoil that was going on with my primary caregiver, my parents, I was acting out in a way, and I didn't know what that was really about. And my grandfather, being a career Army man, was aware of an experimental school at Fort Ord that was open at the time, where the Marines had a school there. It was basically junior high, high school, college, ROTC from 6 years old on. And the participants in that school, that program, were kids that were orphaned. They were kids like myself that weren't working out well with their parents at home, but also demonstrated some sort of ability just for survival, common sense, but also had a bit of an aptitude. So from the age of 6 all the way through junior high, high school, college, grad school, I was in these schools, then completed the formality of Marine Corps boot camp in, I went to boot camp October 87, graduated Christmas, December 23rd, I think it was, or whatever day Christmas is on, 1987. The concept behind the program was that by the time you completed the formality of boot camp, you were already trained. So they immediately could send you downrange. You were deployable, get more time out of you. You're in your 20s. I was 22 at that time. and pretty much immediately went downrange. I did go to 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines for a little while. Went through some basic training there, raid company, recon, so on and so forth. And then just kind of got involved in some heavier stuff, real world operations. So yeah, that's the quick short of it.
When you look at your path, like, and how you evolved as a person, you know, I know in Prison Chronicles, we talk specifically about, you know, making risky behaviors and making choices that were, you know, clearly things that I can't do quoted fingers, normal people would never do. You know, we tend to pick these really insane paths towards things. What is that born from in you? What do you think? Where is the damage that allows you to disregard self at the level that you did?
That is a brilliant first question, and I'll make it concise for you. It's real simple. So one of the things I was talking about, at the age of 6, my father kneeled down, put his hands on my shoulders. He looked me straight in the eye, very clearly said, "You were a mistake. You should have never been born. You're the reason that your mother and I are getting divorced, and I'm going to Vietnam." He walked out the door, and I never saw him again. 2 weeks later, post-hysterectomy, not knowing what that was all about, my mother, in a hormonal imbalance, stabbed me in the arm with a fork. And said, "You're just like your goddamn father." That night, I ran out the door, went and stayed the night at the high school. Next morning, my grandfather picked me up. So that's the story how I ended up there. But more specifically to your question, that situation with my dad, what I come to realize decades later, instilled in me at a subconscious level a need to seek out older authority father figures that, if I worked hard enough, would not think I was a mistake. Now, this was all going on in my mind. I wasn't really aware of what I was doing. Now, in these military schools and the military itself, there's no shortage of non-commissioned officers and officers to try to impress. So that really showed through. It came out in all the schools and all the operations that I was involved in. Everything I did was suicidal type stuff. I had a chip on my shoulder the size of the rock of Gibraltar, more like freaking planet Earth. And I was driven by that. And I have to say, I have a lot of medals for heroism. I got involved in a lot of shit when I was, excuse my language, in the military, the Marine Corps. But I wasn't any more heroic or brave than any of the other men. I just wasn't aware of what was driving me. And it was that moment in time when Dad said, "You were a mistake." Those 4 words changed my life.
How did you find that? Like, that took a lot of time. I mean, decades to get to that point.
Yeah, no, it took me going to prison. It took me committing the crime that I did. It took me losing some very close teammates overseas. And then when I came back, in an effort to attempt to stop somebody from getting murdered, I agreed to do it so that I could control it and nobody would get killed. And let's be real. By the way, I could make $50,000 at the time I thought doing this. Right. This was 5 months after I came back stateside. That went all fine and dandy, right? This it wasn't really an attempt. What I didn't count on that day, though, while I'm on the freeway shooting at this guy's window shield, what I didn't count on was a lady in a car sitting next to Dr. Shoemaker. And the look of horror and terror on her face when the windshield exploded and she heard the gunshots, that's something I had only ever seen in combat. The difference was we were there to stop the people that were causing that trauma. And on that day, in that moment, it was me. And it was an absolute moral reset. And yeah, I denied being involved, but I did everything possible to get caught. Kind of lost my train of thought there because that's kind of heavy. So then I go to prison after that. And about 8-10 years into it. Now, in prison's a very violent and confrontational place in 1997. Gladiator wars were going on at Corcoran Prison, where the guards were setting up fights between people in the hole, bringing friends in to bet on them. And so I had a lot of shame and guilt about what I did, and I had a lot of rage inside me. And so prison was okay for me for a while. I was very much looking for all comers. I very much wanted somebody to take me out, but it just didn't work out that way.
All right.
And after I forgot how many years, it just started sitting in a few self-help groups. And when you're locked down, when you get locked in a 4x9 cell every day after decades, you're forced at some point, hopefully, to look at yourself and figure out how the hell did I go from getting presidential awards, being a hero, quote unquote, to I'm in prison now for attempted murder. And the more I started to unpack that and really delve deeply and use my own education to help me identify some things and patterns of thoughts, I realized it was that moment. And that's when I tried to hang myself and failed. That's where, in the TED Talk I did, you can find on YouTube, came out of that moment. What happened when the rope broke and I was on my knees? So I went in my cell one day, put the rope around my neck, stepped off the toilet seat and had it attached to the locker. I remember I was hanging there for about 5 minutes thinking, damn, how long is this going to take? As if I had somewhere to go when I succeeded, right? Even I laugh about that. It's like, okay, what the fuck? How long is this going to take? And then I blacked out. 45 minutes later, I woke up on the floor. The rope around my neck, it broke. I have no idea. It shouldn't have broke. It's four braid rope, made it out of a sheet, soaked it in water. Something I've done 100 times, but it broke. So there I am on the floor with this rope around my neck and rope burns. And just, as I say in the TED Talk, I felt a couple of things. I felt the shame of having attempted to kill myself and the shame of having failed. And I also realized there are other military people like me. And so I created this program. I spent the next year in the Prison University Project. It's a college program at San Quentin. They allowed me to participate in the English 204 program semester after semester for a year. And I developed the curriculum. And I developed a curriculum that would help me and in turn help other veterans like me. And yeah, I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history. What are your thoughts on providence in that rope breaking? I mean, you soak and braid a homemade rope. It's still not supposed to break. And I know you got a big, thick neck, but come on, man. How do you attribute that happening?
I've been in denial about that for a long time. I mean, I'm not a religious man per se, but I believe in a higher power. I'm half Native American, half Sicilian. I've always believed that there is a power. I'm just not arrogant enough to assign a gender or anything to that higher power.
Yeah, fair enough.
But clearly the broke for a reason, right? I mean, I can't get around that. And frankly, there's things I've been involved in where I literally should be dead and I'm not. And it's one of those things where you can't help but laugh. It's happened so many times to me. And then I find myself in a situation where I'm helping other veterans, and it's from prison. And strangely enough, prison is where I connected with a sense of humanity and compassion. And that's not something you typically would think you would find in prison. But for me, that's where I found it.
How is that?
How is that?
Yeah, how did that happen?
Honestly, it would not have happened completely if it wasn't for the wife of Dr. Shoemaker. At my first parole hearing, she read a letter where she and her family forgave me. And Dr. Shoemaker, unfortunately, he died of cancer 2011 or 12, but he also forgave me. And in that instance where she forgave me, and while this was holy, I know this was not her intent and wholly unexpected, for her to forgive me for my actions on that day, it felt as though I was being forgiven for every sin I ever did in my life. I know that wasn't the intent. That wasn't the outcome. She's a very religious lady, a Christian. But in that moment, I felt somehow cleansed or purged. And I went back to my cell and I wrote a letter to her indicating just that. And that was when I was finally able to really forgive myself for what I did. Even though it was never my intent to kill anyone, I was able to prove that. That's ultimately why I got out of prison, that and creating this program. But ultimately forgiving myself and then looking back over my military career and some of the people that we engaged with, some of the people that I thought at that point in time needed killing more than anybody else in the history of mankind. Some truly what I thought were evil people. But when I really looked back at some of those people's backgrounds and looked at how they were raised and how they were taken away from their families at an early age, I really realized how arrogant it was of me to buy into what I bought into. Yeah. And I really believe that everybody, no matter who you are, is redeemable. I think everyone has within them redemption. I think people just have to be afforded the opportunity to grasp that.
Let's spend some time with this thought too, because this is definitely one of the themes. And what I love about the Prison Chronicles is you guys have the actual real experiences. This is ground truth stuff. And you know, you and I, we're warriors. We've gone out, we've done all the hard, seen all the crazy, but the ground truth is a reality it's even more real than boots on the ground. Because a lot of times, and you know, you get boots on the ground, half the people don't know what the hell they're doing. You know, like I remember the first time in a firefight, right? When everything slowed down, and I'm like, oh, now I know what I'm doing. You know?
Yeah, no, it doesn't get any real of that. And yeah, most of the people don't know what the hell's going on or what they're doing.
Yeah. So,
I mean, there's nothing like a firefight to scare the hell out of you and give you a reality check. What am I doing here?
Right. Which is what we all say, like, ah, shit, God damn it, you know, but we have the ability because we've been shot at enough that we're able to operate in this area where no one is supposed to humanly operate normally because we've got this ground truth reality. And so you all don't know each other. I mean, you and Kenyatta are connected, and that's how I got to you, but you know, you don't know Shaka Sangura personally. You don't know Honoré Vachon. You don't know these different guys. You guys have all said the same thing. People are redeemable. Everybody is worthy of rehabilitation. So, and I love this about what the story is if we take that lens and instead of saying everybody needs to get punished and then you just layer on more and more punishment, it doesn't appear to be a reliable path to recidivism. These aren't perfect solutions in any regard, but if we're going to look at a way to approach this, let's fail at rehabilitating everybody. Let's fail at allowing redemption to be a thing.
Yeah. Well, I think things are definitely changing. I mean, within California, I think the direction the correctional system is definitely is changing.
Okay.
And because of Ralph Diaz, the director of corrections, I'm actually allowed and thankful enough to be a part of that change. I mean, within 2 months of getting out of prison, I was able to go into Solano prison and start meeting with the men there and facilitating the BHP group, the program that I started. And now we're in 6 prisons. I go to 4 of them weekly.
Right.
I've met with the mental health team. I've been asked to speak at the mental health summit 2 times now in Sacramento on suicide prevention. They're desperately looking for ways to do what they do in a better way that's more productive for society and the people within the prison system. And guys like Kenyatta, man, I lack the words to give him enough credit for his attitude and his mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that about him. He continues to give and redefine who he was growing up. All of us who have gone through these trials, you guys, particularly in prison, you come out better people. But that is not always the path for everybody. Talk a little bit about what you experience with folks who aren't able to figure it out or are in the process of figuring it out. What does that look like so we can get some reality? Because to say that things are changing and people are all leaning on this problem in the right direction, I got to get everybody else caught up with what you're seeing and how we're getting there. So let's talk about the folks that are inside that struggle with the reality and the culpability with whether it's their crime or just their attitude, you know, their reckless behavior. And then let's talk a little bit about, you know, where we're going.
Well, I think part of the problem for self-discovery and the ability to move on is shame. Guilt and shame is a big part of it. I used to facilitate and I participated in a program called Victim Awareness Education, VOGUE. It's run through Inside Prison Project, IPP. And part of that program, one of the first things you do is you're essentially writing a crime impact report. You're writing a confession of what your crime is. Mm. Now, imagine you're in prison for rape, and you're sitting in a group of men, usually 11 to 12 men per group, and it comes to your time to read your crime impact statement, and you state in that crime impact statement, on such and such day, you raped someone or you molested someone. That is incredibly and profoundly hard to do. And let me go on further to say something about that. As many years as I spent in combat, I absolutely, in my mind, knew that I knew what courage was. I had that locked down. Nobody could tell me what courage was. I had that one under control. But after sitting in a group in prison where masculinity is, that's the word of the day, and men are sharing these stories and unburdening themselves of these tremendous bad things that they did, that's courageous. I mean, that's truly courageous. And then to go a step further, when you go on to explore these guys' stories, and there's a lot of empirical data that supports this, a lot of guys that are in prison for rape and molestation have in fact been raped and molested themselves. That doesn't make it okay. It speaks to the story, or it speaks to the fact that we all have a history, obviously. We all have backgrounds. People deal with them differently. Not everyone can step up and sit in these groups and do that.
Right.
So they stay in prison.
Or when they get out, they come back.
They come back. Now, I'm sure you're aware of the statistics for people that are sentenced to life coming back versus people with determinate sentences that have dates, meaning they're given a 20-year date for 20 bank robberies or whatever. Not all of them, but a greater majority of the people that aren't looking at a life sentence don't feel they have to do the work. So they don't do the work. And therefore they don't arrive at a place where they're any different when they came in. If anything, they become more hardened. I don't know how many guys that I've met in my job, because I also work with transitional housing, who said to me, when I ask them, so what kind of programming have you done? What kind of insights have you developed since you've been in? I don't have to do any of that stuff. I got a 10-year sentence. That's it. I'm doing my time. I'm waiting for the clock to run out, and now I need a place to live. And my reply is, well, I'm sorry, you're not coming to where I offer housing, because that's not the mentality I want where we offer housing. Right. I want to know that you have some discovery and that you can identify and articulate how and why you ended up making a decision that you did to put you in prison with a life sentence. Or if you don't have a life sentence, you got a 20-year sentence, but you're not doing anything, really?
Does this happen because the system, isn't incented to create these positive outcomes? I mean, that person's got their 10 years, they're out in 5. And honestly, at least in terms of California, we're glad to have that person leave and open up a bed and create an open, it's like, yeah, we want this person to get out and we're done with all of that. It doesn't seem like it compels them to do the work that they have to do.
Yeah. And that's a system that they're working on changing. It's still flawed. They're still trying to change it. I like the model that I believe the governor put forth that they were trying to implement, and that was nobody gets out of prison. You work your way out of prison. Mm-hmm. And until you do the work, you don't get out. I think that's the way it should be. Absolutely.
So you're saying, like, you get a bank robbery, and a bank robbery comes with a standard sentence of 10 years, and then your actions can reduce or lengthen that stay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't even know about times, frankly. I think people need to genuinely stay where they're at until that nut gets cracked and they can articulate and truly connect and gain insight into how and why they made a decision that they did. I think everyone has the ability to do that. Some people, it takes a lot longer. Right now, I can think of a few names. So I'm not going to say that I want to. They're just hard-headed people and we have to take into account, this isn't just cut and dry, do the work or don't do the work. You have to take into account mental health. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people when Reagan, I think it was back in the day, that closed down a lot of the mental health hospitals. Well, those people then defaulted and came to prison, and they shouldn't be in prison. I couldn't even tell you how many people they called EOPs, enhanced outpatient. There are so many people that just need mental health medical attention. They need medication. They need appropriate medication. They need to be monitored. And that just doesn't happen to the degree with which it should for many, many people in prison. Then their time is up and they parole them with 30 days of medicine, nowhere to live. They give them a voucher to stay at a hotel over the weekend or something. And I've met countless guys that I committed a crime to come back because I just had no way to survive.
Yeah, like the number we saw was that most people walk out of prison with less than $200 in their pocket.
Yeah, that was an absolute. It was funny to me. I'm paroling, and here's your $200 gate money after 23 years in prison. Fortunately for me, as a veteran and the Marin County Veterans Service Officer, Sean Steffens, he came to the prison 5-6 years before I got out, and he was kind of experimenting with me. And we started filing claims, service connection claims for guys who were in the military, for everything you had coming. I ended up leaving with 100% service connected for all my injuries and everything that I had from my military days.
Yeah.
So when I paroled with a paycheck. And then on top of that, I created a program that's being funded by CDC largely and other private donors. So I did okay. That allowed me to then go back to the prison and help other people. And one of the things that we focus on is making sure if you're an incarcerated veteran, you get what you have coming to you. And it's important to realize that incarcerated veterans, say like myself, 100% service connected. Now, after 61 days of incarceration, I can only get 10% of that a month, not to exceed $141.
Right.
But that's okay, because if I have a wife and kids, I can do an apportionment for them to get the rest of that. So I can still give back and support my family to a degree, even from inside while I work on myself.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that we like to do is make sure that, and it saddens because I see I'm only working with the veteran population, and veterans should never, there's no excuse for a veteran to parole from prison and fail because they have things available to them. They just need to know what those things are. The rest of the general population don't have those things.
Right.
And that's another contributing factor to the recidivism rate. A veteran coming out of prison with an honorable or an OTH at a minimum has grant per diem available to them through the VA, which is housing. That is significant. If you have a house to go to, a room, and you're covered for a period of time while you get on your feet, that's a huge part of it too. So there's no one answer to the recidivism rate. It's multifaceted, right? There's the mental health, there's the housing, there's the support. There's a lot of factors there. Education is another vital and huge. Most of the guys I met in 23 years had a 6th grade education.
Wow.
Let me share a story with you real quick.
Yeah.
When I first got to Corcoran in 1997, there was a white guy, NLR, Nazi lowrider, swastika right on his freaking forehead, and a black guy from Compton. I don't know what he was, Compton, Crip, whatever he was, but he's one of those Compton blood, one of those Crips, whatever he was. He's a gangbanger. And when I saw these two guys, they were stabbing each other at Corcoran on B Yard over a table, territory, right? 15 years later, here I am at San Quentin, sitting in my cell, got the headphones on, watching the news. And there's these two guys on the tier right in front of my cell. And I have the headphones on, so I can't hear them, but I see the body language, and they're arguing. They're going back and forth. And and it was the same two guys. I'm like, oh, shit, one of these guys is going to get thrown off the tier. So I take my headphones off, and they're arguing about the differences in philosophy between Aristotle and Plato. I mean, could you picture that scene? So as what I'm speaking to there is that education is all encompassing. It's spiritual. It's emotional. It's ascending in a way. I mean, these guys had 6th grade educations back in the day, and now they're in the Prison University Project, the college program, and they're learning about Aristotle, Plato, critical thinking, the ability to clearly articulate and formulate your thoughts in a way, which then also leads to when you're going to the self-help programs, helps you to understand your own behavior and gain insights. So as you can see, there's just a multitude of layers to rehabilitation. It's not one factor. It's a multitude of factors. And frankly, they're all equally important. Mental health is right there, because if your mental health is not right, you can't capture the education and the insight that comes from that.
When we look at the institution as a whole, are we putting too many people in prison that could be rehabilitating on the, restorative justice or any one of these other programs where?
Wow.
Yeah.
So for some people, my feeling, I don't want to say opinion, everybody's got opinions. My feeling, my observations are, and I'll use myself as an example. I needed to be captive, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
I needed to be locked in a cell and forced to look at myself. And people in society, it's easy to be distracted with everything that's going on in day-to-day life and just never look in the rearview mirror, just moving forward. Society offers or prison offers people, whether they like it or not, an opportunity to just chill the hell out for a second and be forced to look at yourself. Having said that, looking at the burden this places on society and the recidivism rate, yeah, I think there could be some alternate sentencing programs, just like they have the Veterans Court now, where you're mandated to go to certain groups and take certain programs to learn these things. But the incentive is not quite as high when you're actually having to work your way out of a situation that you put yourself in.
I went through the Marin Veteran Diversion Court, and this is how bad the Marin Court was in my era when I went through. They had no earthly clue what to do with me. The DA did not want to offer diversion. They wanted to make an example out of me for some reason, and ultimately, the whole thing was a stupid waste of everybody's time. I didn't need to go to prison. I hadn't really even done anything wrong. Now, with that said, I did end up in jail, but they gave me they didn't know what to do. So the day that they gave me my, we agreed on what I was going to do because I wasn't guilty for anything. We did veteran diversion. They said, they gave me the standard, like you have to do 6 months of this, 6 months of that, 6 months of, all these requirements. And it had to do with things like alcohol treatment. I'm like, well, I don't have an alcohol problem, so I'm going to go.
Hey, this is P.A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
And it had to do with things like alcohol treatment. I'm like, well, I don't have an alcohol problem, so I'm going to go. And for anybody who's ever gone to an AA meeting, if you're not an alcoholic and you go to an AA meeting, all you do is distract that whole group because now they're convinced that you're an alcoholic, So I was, I had to work through this thing. And then the other thing was, there was not a veteran in the room, nobody else to represent me. And then I kept trying to prove that I had complied with the court's order, but it was so abnormal to them. I didn't trust them to get it right. They're like, oh, just mail it in. It'll be fine. And I'm like, the hell I will. They told me to call my parole officer, but I wasn't on parole. And so I'm like, I'll comply. I call my parole officer, like, quit calling me. You're not on parole. And I'm like, I'm required to call you, So this whole thing was broke. So I go in on my last day, and I go there. I have no court-appointed attorney. They don't know why I'm there. The judge starts with, you didn't comply with our order. And I gave her my entire, psych profile that the VA had built for me up through all of my PTSD counseling. And she's like, oh, okay, you have been doing this stuff. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is all fine. Why are you here? And I'm like, and by the way, again, still nobody from the veteran side representing me for the county, like just no ability to do that. I was lucky that I didn't look like, a problem. I looked like a lawyer when I went there. And so I was able to go through this, but look at the care that it took on my end to ensure that, because I was there in court with guys going, I don't know what happened. I turned my paperwork in, and maybe they're lying, but I didn't want that to be me. So I went through extraordinary steps. But I was also finally mentally well enough to do all that stuff. I easily could have failed at that process, Ron, and been in jail for no reason at all.
Brother, many do.
Yeah.
Many don't have the ability to do just what you explained. They think, they get distracted, whatever the reasons are.
Yeah.
Many just don't have the ability to do that. And they end up in prison or county jails. And county jails, let me tell you, county jail is 1,000 times worse than prison.
Yeah, it's crazy. So let's talk a little bit about the system, because the other thing I know from my very brief times in jail, not counting Mexico, the treatment that you get as a person is often, I will say, at least dismissive of your existence, if not inhumane. Where they, and granted, the correction officer's job is hard and everything else, but one person can decide that they don't care at all about your thing, and then you just sit there and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait, or they do something negative, or I don't know. There are so many things that can inhibit someone's progress because of the inhumanity in the prison system.
Absolutely. No denying that. There's no Yeah, absolutely. It's scary how somebody with less than a high school education or a GED can have so much power over people. And the thing that's significant about what you just mentioned is people don't realize how people in authority like that plant a seed. It creates at a subconscious level a distrust for authority, which in turn adds to the recidivism rate. Because then when these people get out and they get approached or have to deal with any authority, they don't want to, or they run from it, which causes more problems. So yeah, you're spot on there. The people with the keys absolutely have to be better educated and better qualified to be holding those keys. It's okay that the director of corrections has all these ideas and supports these things, but if the guy on the ground, the correction officer or the jailer at the front line dealing with you is insensitive and overwhelmed by their own issues, it's a disaster. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, let's spend a little bit in this space, and we're going to be critical right now of the corrections system because it can take it. they can handle this. When we were building the Prison Chronicles, I tried to find people from the correction side of things to talk to me, to include their public affairs officers. And I have to say, either they're cowards, or fuck, I don't know. Why wouldn't they talk to me? And I had people directly say, no way in hell I go on the record talking about what I do for a living. And I'm not calling them individually cowards, but as an institution, they are terrified of their own reality.
Oh yeah. I deal with that I deal with that regularly. In fact, I got to say, having said that, and I agree 100%, by the way, with what you just said. Right. There is a person who I believe to a large degree will talk to people. His name's Lieutenant Robinson, and he's the public information officer at San Quentin Prison. He is the most, I think, honest, forthcoming, and genuine person that I've met in most of my time in prison. He has a heart, and he walks a very difficult line, because when you're an employee of the state, you're unfortunately in two categories. You're an inmate lover or you're an inmate hater. Mm. And where do you want to fall into that realm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Public information officers. Yeah. I'm not going to say what I'd like to say. Got a couple I could think of right now.
Right.
So I'll just talk about the one that I like.
Okay.
Which is Lieutenant Robinson. And he's a genuine human being, and I think he would talk to you to a degree. Yeah. Because the direction that CDC is going right now, I think it's commendable that they reach out to people like me, Kenyatta, and other people. They're allowing us to go back in and do this work because they get it. They see that this is peer-to-peer. Who better to help these guys than guys that have been in the shoes, guys like you and me, just like a military guy. It's best for a military guy to help a military guy. Yeah, public information officers are difficult.
Yeah, well, and they're not. Yeah, go ahead.
To be fair, and I want to be fair and transparent, right? They have a difficult job.
Yeah.
It's a dance.
And I totally agree. And I want to make sure I do definitely say that. Like when I am critical of these guys, it's because I expect a lot from them, and they have an incredibly difficult job.
There you go.
So, and I don't know that I would act differently. I don't know how someone who actually works on the block who can avoid their form of PTSD, like you can't be soft. You have to be firm. You have to be the same. They're almost like drill sergeants, except for with way higher cost personally, day to day, and people that actually would harm you if you slip or get too nice or whatever. I am very understanding of that aspect of it. However, we can't have one person undermine an entire system. I want to get back to the bigger picture, though. You visit a lot of prisons. Okay. I know that San Quentin has more aid programs than all the rest of them, basically combined. But how is it at the other places like Corcoran, Susanville, all these other places?
So outlying prisons are lacking. No fault of their own. It's the geography. Let's take San Quentin for a minute. I mean, you're a stone throw away from Berkeley College. You know, it's the heart of the liberal movement. So San Quentin's not lacking in getting people volunteer to come in there. Now, when you get to these other outlying communities, people may care, but now it becomes an issue of, okay, geographically, who's around? How far are these people willing to travel? That's the biggest issue I've seen. It's travel. And CDC is desperately trying to put together a grant program that can help programs like mine, say, go to Pelican Bay. It's all the way out there in Crescent City.
Yeah.
I can't drive there every day, once a week, or rather, right? I mean, as it is, I drive to Solano once a week. I go to CSP SAC. I go to Soledad, which is the closest one, San Quentin. I spend 20 hours a week just driving to go participate in an hour-and-a-half program with some guys.
Right.
For these outlying prisons, CDC is trying to create something where they have like a building or a hotel where people that come can stay there at no cost while they're there doing the program once a week. So they're trying to figure out ways to incentivize, if I'm saying that right, programming at these outlying prisons. Frankly, there's just nothing out there. How do you get people to commit to go to someplace when, you know, it's just it's cost prohibitive?
Yeah. Well, and again, the system can get in its own way. I know John, from his time as a private investigator, would often drive to, let's say, Susanville prison, which you have to leave the state of California to get to. That's how far away it is. You have to leave California.
Dalton Bay's the same way. You have to leave California to get back into it.
Yeah. So you go to these places that are that far away, and you get there and they're like, no one's coming in today. Or you don't have your DD 172-alpha, so you can't come in. And then your next day to come in would be in 2 weeks, Tuesday. You know, and so it's administratively, it becomes incredibly burdensome to do these things. And you're like, I'm doing charity today. I have to work in 2 weeks on Tuesday. I'll get the form, but can we do this here? And they're not equipped to do it.
Yeah, I've had that very thing happen at CSP SAC. It takes me 3.5 hours to get there from here. I've literally, this has happened to me twice. I pulled into the parking lot and then got the email, the prison's closed due to a stabbing.
Right.
The stabbing's not even on the yard that I'm at,
right,
or I'm going to.
Mm-hmm.
But however, because that spot staff have to respond,
sure,
they lock the whole thing down. And so it's like, okay, so, 3.5 hour ride back home, podcast.
You're welcome. So, and again, like, as we look at this and this is California, where it's very progressive. You know, you go to a state that's not as progressive with their prison system, or they just have less resources. Rich Leday, who, he did the interview with us for your portion of the Prison Chronicles. He went into all of these, as a PhD, he went into all these prisons in Alabama, and he was studying rape and all these things that were happening in the prison, and met a number of people. And one of the guards that did talk to us, and officially on the record, but very, very trepidatious when she did, she said, think about my problem. I show up to work. I run a bunch of guards. And she's retired. And she said, it's 6.5 hours of work for me the moment I step foot in that place, just like by doing my daily work. And then every day something would happen that would take half of my day. So I don't even get to my regular 6.5 hour day. And then Hyundai comes and builds a car manufacturing plant, and I lose 1/3 of my staff. And I'm desperate to bring anybody in the door just to fill the gate. And so my ability to build a team that's something more than just 8 and hit the gate guys, it's extremely compromised. So I do understand how challenging this is. Do you see similar problems in California, or have they kind of figured that part out and getting quality people to stay around?
Well, quality people, that's an interesting thing. There's something going on in the system that has been going on for the last few years now, where the old school's retiring, the old guard, so to speak. And let's just keep it real. The old guard back in the day, these are knuckle draggers. Mm-hmm. These are guys that are guards that like brawling more than the guys inside like brawling. I mean, some of them came to CDC so they can brawl. Those guys are retiring. And a lot of the people that I'm seeing coming in now, that I've been seeing, they're not about that mentality. They're genuinely pushing back on the inmate lover or inmate hater aspect or mentality. And they realize the significance of just being a human being. When the judge sentenced me to 32 to life, he didn't say 32 to life plus being badgered daily by a CO who doesn't like me because I'm a veteran that came to prison. That's what the judge didn't say. And you used to see a lot of that. And to some degree, you still see a lot of that. I remember when I went back to San Quentin, when they finally let me back in, they don't like letting you back into the prison you paroled from. I paroled from San Quentin. It took some while for me to get back in there because, frankly, the person in charge that made that decision couldn't stand me because when I was there, I went over their head several times and got things accomplished. They finally let me back in. Staff changes, people move on. And some of the guards there that didn't like me, that like made it a point to come and take my watch because they were guards and they could.
Yeah.
When they saw me come in, you could just see their faces turn red because now I'm coming in a suit as a civilian.
Uh-huh.
And I'm working directly with headquarters and the director and their bosses. And let me tell you, some of those guys, they don't say anything, but they just, you could see just, I mean, you know, one of them I had to ask, are you okay? I mean, you look like you're about to have a heart attack. And the guy's just like, ugh.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, mentalities have to change, and they are changing. I was doubtful that I would see that type of change, but these old timers, they're retiring. There's still a few around, but the reality is, you know what, Pete? It only takes one guy, one correctional officer with authority to have a lifelong negative impact on an individual.
Why? Why would they do that? What is the purpose behind that?
Behind the negativity on some people?
Just like, why would they choose that path? I mean, you know, the word correct like, is in their title. Like, you're correctional officers, but you're actually doing the opposite of what you're supposed to do by making someone have, you know, they've already been convinced that society and life is against them. And now, like, you know, you don't even have an opportunity. You completely undermine this person's chance to get out and, you know, get back to being a contributing member of society. Why?
Well, I think that just speaks to a need that I think is being implemented to a degree of a better screening process for who's allowed to wear that badge.
Yeah.
It's just that simple.
Yeah.
And, well, yeah, what more can I say about that?
I don't know what else you would need to say. Let's talk a little bit about what's coming up. I mean, I know you're working on things. Tell us about your organization and give us a snapshot of, I mean, how far into the future can we even look? I know there's programs that often get undermined within the prison, but eventually these things tend to work out. Like, we're not locking down as much anymore, at least in California. Talk about your program, and then talk about what you see coming on the immediate horizon.
Well, my program, I'm expanding. I've received a few grants from CDC. There's more grants coming out that give us funding to do the things, the driving around. It's interesting. The Veterans Healing Veterans Program, I am the only proven and reputable veterans program throughout the state of California for incarcerated veterans. There's a lot of other self-help programs for the rest of the population, but VHV is the only reputable program dealing with peer-to-peer suicide prevention and the whole PTSD deal that we do. That ties in directly, really, with the TED Talk I did, because in the TED Talks, what I'm talking about is a boot camp out idea, a process where active duty military people, just like when they join, they go to boot camp. Well, before they leave, they separate, they go to a type of boot camp out, a reintegration process. That's the same thing that we're doing right now with CDC. And I'm working right now with people in Washington to get that program implemented for the United States Marine Corps in a pilot program. That would be the first one, the pilot program. And then our idea is that if all the other branches follow suit. It's important because if I can get that far upstream of the problem before guys separate from the military and go to the prison or commit suicide. So I'm you know, militarily speaking, I'm fighting on two fronts. Before people leave the military and the 6,900 guys we have in the California prison system, getting to them before they get out. So that's my big goal.
Right.
Is getting to all those people. Now, how I'm approaching to do that, and I got to give a big heads up to the warden, Craig Koenig at CTF Soledad. What we're trying to do there is create a veterans hub. So what would be at a veterans hub? And I envisioned 3 of them: a northern, a central, and a southern. CTS Soledad will be the southern or the central hub. And what goes on there is all the VA stuff that's available to the guys is consolidated in one spot.
Okay.
We have a VA compensation examiner on site. We have my PTSD program, about 5 to 6 of them going on site. An entire yard of nothing but veterans that get transferred there voluntarily to get all this help and get this stuff done, because they're scattered throughout the state and they don't get it. Initially, I met with Ralph Diaz, the director of corrections. He said, "I'm all for this. Let's do this." Unfortunately, he's not completely in charge.
Right.
DAV, Division of Adult Institutions, which is the guys that handle the housing, are like, "Nah, we're not going to do that. We're going to leave the designation of that yard like it is, and that's that." So the current designation of this particular yard is called a sensitive needs yard. They're working to convert that to a non-designated programming yard so GP inmates can transfer there. Anyone can transfer there that's a veteran and do this. So the powers that be below Ralph said, "No, we're not going to do that." So then the guys, now prepare yourself. The general population guys, myself and the warden went to a couple of the other yards to explain this to the guys, and I went to some other prisons. And the guys on the GP line, the general population lines, are like, "I don't care what the designation is. I don't care if it's S and Y or whatever. Send me there now. I want to go there." Headquarters then says, "No, we're not making any more S and Ys. They can't go there. So you're not going to convert the yards so we can help them, and you're not going to let them transfer there on their own so they can help themselves."
Right.
Big WTF there.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at right now. So what the warden at that prison did, he consolidated. He allowed guys within the prison to move around. So he's actually making that veteran yard happen. But we still need the ability to let other people transfer there. And this is the future for VHV, and I believe CDC is to have these hubs, these 3 hubs, where the 6,900 veterans that are in California prison could be divided up amongst and sent to these hubs, and get everything that they need to succeed when they leave.
Yeah.
And we're actually in the process of that now.
What is the rationale behind not allowing these veterans to, transition to the place where they can start to work on getting out? What's the resistance?
Literally, the pinky on the hand and the finger next to it, not knowing what the other one's doing, or frankly, even caring.
Right.
It's that simple.
Is this a union problem?
I think it's a union problem. And so this, I found out also, the California Department of Corrections, like the Veterans Administration, is actually not one organization. They fall under the same umbrella, right?
Uh-huh.
But they have divisions. So you have the mental health division, you have the director of adult institutions, and then you have the 2 or 3 different divisions. I mean, there's more associate wardens and captains than the Pope has prayers on Easter Sunday. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. I mean, they have a $12 billion a year budget, and they can't get out of their own way.
Right.
Part of the problem with CDC is they're a reactionary organization, and partly rightfully so. I mean, they deal with riots, they deal with this stuff that goes on all the time. And so when they have the Willy Wonka ticket, so to speak, right there in front of them, they're too busy cleaning up their other irrational decisions to look at the one that's going to help.
I don't know if you know this, but that's really frustrating.
Oh, yeah. Hey, be in my shoes.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we've been chasing a contract to expand the transitional housing for 18 months now. And we love it. We got a $1.5 million capital grant, VTC did, to expand the formerly incarcerated veteran housing. $1.5 million. Did it. Built those out, built those condominiums out, have the rooms there, they're ready, and they're empty. They've been empty for 4 months now because CDC won't pony up to pay for the programming. Now, this COVID-19 virus comes along.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden we get an email yesterday from Sacramento saying, please bid. We need to house people because they want to release the elderly before they get sick. They get sick. So it's like, really, it takes a national crisis for you to do what you should have been doing all along. Okay, that just kind of makes sense, unfortunately. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and bid on that. It's just this is what it takes.
Yeah, that's.
But again,
is this in any way? This is not just the veteran population of the imprisoned. This is all of the systems are like this. Where there's your version who's focused on gangs or whatever. Everybody has these kind of organizational hurdles to get through. Is that right?
Well, the general population, when it comes to transitional housing, there's a company called GEO. And they have a monopoly on transitional housing. When they started letting lifers out of prison, they came into play. And they stockpile people. It's just like prison, only out of prison. You have to count just like you do in prison. You have to stand up and say your CDC number, which, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on there that is not rehabilitative. It's actually harming people and adds to the recidivism rate. And they stockpile. They might put 24 people in a room that's big enough for 10.
Because they're paid by head count?
They're paid by the state. So that, they have these $1 million a year contracts to house people.
And these are not people in prison.
No, these are people that are paroling. So they parole from prison basically to prison.
Right.
Only it's prison on the street. You have a curfew, you have this, you have that. You have mandatory programs you have to go to during the day, which inhibits your ability to move forward and reintegrate into society. Yeah, it's a for-profit. Let's face it, GEO is a for-profit. That's all they care about is their profit and their numbers. They were directed actually by CDC to have the Veterans Transition Center bid for beds. And so they told VTC to go ahead and do a bid, and then they rejected the bid.
Okay.
Yeah. Because they don't want to give out any money. Now, because of this COVID virus thing going on, people are jumping through hoops to realize, no, hey, we got to get some people out of prison. We got some elderly that are going to be compromised if we don't get them out of prison. And that's where we stand now.
If you could, as, whatever, the chief of all prisons in California, if you could change one thing, and not just in the veteran side of things, just one thing, what would be the one dial you would turn to fix that problem? Like, what would it be?
The latitude that the parole boards have on granting parole. Does that make sense?
You know what? No, I don't understand. What help me understand that more.
Okay, so for, again, we're talking about lifers, I think, because they're the ones that are or are not getting out of prison, right? Based on a panel.
Right.
So you go before the parole board. It's a 3-man or woman panel that decides whether or not you've arrived at insight and whether or not you should be granted parole and determine that you're not a threat to society anymore.
Right.
Between them and the governor's office, they have way too much latitude. Meaning, if I get in a fight with my wife and then that morning and I go to the parole office to, go to do my job, I've seen these guys take it out on people and give them denials just because they're in a bad mood.
Yeah.
Do you follow me?
I do. I follow you.
There
now.
needs to be
Yeah.
Yeah. So their ability, they need to be governed by an independent organization. So how it works now, you go to the parole board, and God bless them, they've come a long way. Jennifer Schaefer is someone you should talk to because she has made monumental changes in how the board interacts, but it's still flawed. Say you get granted a parole, right? You're going to be good. You got a date. You went to the parole board. They're satisfied with you. Now you have to wait 120 to 150 days for the governor's review. Well, now it goes up to Sacramento, and some person that's not even the governor goes through the file and takes your date away. 90% of the time, they cite lack of insight. Now, at least 6 of the guys that's happened to that I'm aware of are in the BHV program, and they have incredible insight. So what's going on there? Yeah. I can say that as a professional, not only academically, but as someone that's been in prison, and I have the experience, and that's why I go work with CDC. I can say that these guys have insight. So who's the character up in Sacramento saying they don't?
Yeah.
And also these guys are 70, 80-year-old guys that are absolutely not a threat to society.
Right.
So the one dial I would change is that process.
I read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers, and they talk about people who grant bail. You know, and in New York City, it's just so busy. Like, that's just a completely separate process. And what we never do is we never assess that person's judgment. You know, whether it's the parole board or the governor's review person. I get why you put those things in there, but if your default is no, and you don't even know like if that's a good decision or not, all of a sudden you get like these, you know, bias problems where like this person, like you said, they have a bad day or whatever it is. And we don't want to put people at risk, but also we want to have this rehabilitative form of justice where this person does learn their lesson, they do correct their behavior, and now it's time for them to get, you know, quit paying for them to be in prison just because someone had an argument with their significant other.
Exactly. And let me tell you, that happens regularly.
Yeah.
It happens regularly with the guys in prison. Yeah.
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 This is why I'm doing the Prison Chronicles.
It's not perfect, right?
Yeah. It is to illustrate how, look, and everybody has good intention and everybody wants the best. It's just, it's a complex system and it's hard to get everything in aligned and nudging towards the same direction, you know? Because like you said,
exactly.
Sometimes two guys are stabbing each other, you know, like, and that's a real serious shit that requires a completely different set of values and responses. So it ain't easy. That's for sure.
No. And again, it would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge they are making sweeping, vast changes in how they deal with the population. Having said that, it's such a huge population that it's climbing Mount Everest in your bare feet with one hand.
And right now, Mount Everest is closed.
There you go.
So
maybe they could take a cue from that.
Well, listen, man, I appreciate you coming on. I mean this. I said this last time we talked when we recorded. I want to be more involved with what you're doing because it is important to know that there's a guy like me out there. Like I have done it. I'm supposed to be dead. I should have killed myself. I managed to navigate out of that stuff so far. And, you know, to know that there is a future, because I was convinced I had no future. I was 100% convinced. I was waiting for the trapdoor below me to open. And because I focused on that trapdoor, I kept fucking myself up. Because I lived like I had no future. But it doesn't have to be that way. So I appreciate you doing the hard work that you do. That ain't an easy thing to do, man.
It definitely has its moments. I'm fortunate that I have someone working with me, Samantha Stair. She's our operations manager. She almost quit one time. We had to sit down and have a real heart-to-heart because I'm not an easy guy to deal with. But luckily, she has a big soul, and she's wise beyond her years. And really, what she's experiencing is what it's like to work with guys that have issues like PTSD and survivor's guilt and significant trauma. And she's really coming to her own in
survivor's guilt and all that stuff that you had to go through too, because that's also a significant, you know.
Yeah, you know what it is. You've been there.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, why that guy? I literally had a guy die and nothing had happened to him. He got killed by a concussion wave, basically. You know, maybe he had some kind of congenital defect you wouldn't know about, could never know about it until you're dead. And I'm sitting 10 feet from him. Maybe 40 feet. Who knows? Not far, though. You know? He's dead. I'm not.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Hey, Ron, listen, I appreciate you coming on. How do folks find you on the internet? How do they get a chance to help and read about what you're doing?
Facebook, we have a VHP page. We have an Instagram page. We're out there. Just go look up Veterans Healing Veterans. We're out there. We're on, like I said, we're on Facebook, Instagram. We have a webpage. VeteransHealingVeterans.org. We're out there.
I will put everything in the show notes too, so everybody can look it up and see about Veterans Healing Veterans. And again, hey, thanks for coming on and sharing the story, and thanks for being part of the Prison Chronicles.
Hey, thanks for providing the opportunity and the platform to let people know what's going on and what's happening. Look forward to the future.